Sorry. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode, New York City Crime Spot. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Mr. Lenny DePaul. He is a Navy veteran, a former Secret Service agent. He is a retired U.S. Marshal. He was the Chief Inspector, Commander of the New York, New Jersey Regional Fugitive Task Force for the U.S. Marshals. He also sits on the board at the U.S. Marshal Museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas. He was the subject of the A&E show, him and his crew of marshals, the A&E show Manhunters, which was from 2008. I think it ran 3 seasons, Lenny. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
More recently, he was a cast member on History Channel's Hunting Hitler. And, you know, Lenny, if there's a big case going on in the United States, whether it be recently, we had the Brian Laundrie case, we had the Kohlberger case with the Idaho murders, there's a good chance we're going to see you on TV, Lenny. So, and that I did when both of those cases were going on. Special thanks to Tim. Thank you so much for helping to set this up. And Lenny, thank you so much. It's great to meet you. How are you today?
Brett, I'm doing great, and thanks for that kind introduction. But yeah, when it comes to the world of manhunting, I spent 3 decades hunting violent felony fugitives across the globe. So, you know, the men and women that are downrange doing God's work, I say, I salute each and every one of them every day.
Yeah. So where does it all begin for you, Lenny? What is your background? Where are you from originally?
Well, I was born in Utica, New York, which is up in upstate New York and central New York. Joined the Navy at 17. I actually lived with my grandmother. Sadly, she died in my arms. So I ended up joining the Navy. I did a total of 5 years active, actually 8 years total, 5 years active duty. I got out of the Navy. I was in San Diego, California. I was walking down the pier with my sea bag, and I turned around, looked at this massive ship I was on, and I said, well, that was fun. Now what? So I had no idea. I went back to New York. I decided to get into, my family was in the harness horse business. So I lived, I lived on feeding horses every morning before school and cleaning stalls. But so that was kind of a dead end. I ended up in the Maryland, DC area, worked for a construction company. And I actually I put in windows and a roof in a guy's house who was an academy instructor at the Secret Service Academy in Beltsville, Maryland. And we became friends. He said, man, you got a great background from the military. Why don't you apply for, a job with us? I said, well, I'm an uneducated military guy, Danny. I said, I don't have a degree. It was a prerequisite at the time. He said, well, you can get into the uniform division and work your way up. They'll send you to school and So I said, well, where do I sign? So anyways, I applied. About a year and a half later, I got a call from the recruiter. It was on a Thursday. I'll never forget it. She said, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you got the job. The bad news is you start Monday. So I hesitated for maybe 3 seconds and said, I'll take it. So I had no idea what I was getting into. It was not one of my dream jobs. I didn't focus on law enforcement. I had a few relatives, on the job in upstate New York. But anyways, I kind of hit the mother lode. I was there for 5.5 years during the Reagan administration, spent 3 years at the White House with him and his family, and ended up at foreign missions for a couple of years. And I had a couple of colleagues that went over to the U.S. Marshal Service and said, hey, best job in the government. You're chasing people. You're not making cases. You're not sitting on trial for, 3-4 months. I said, what's a U.S. Marshal? I had no idea. It was one of those things. Long story short, I ended up taking a lateral transfer, came back to Brooklyn, New York, where I started in 1989. And got into the fugitive squad and never left until I retired a few years back. So it's been an interesting career. The government owned me for a long time, Brett.
Yeah. So tell me about the Secret Service. Tell me about working in the White House during the Reagan administration. One day you're fixing a window on some guy's house.
Yeah.
The next day, hey, there's Ronald Reagan. How you doing, Mr. Reagan? What is that like?
Well, put that into perspective. I'm from upstate New York, small family. Next thing I know, I'm in the east wing of the White House where our locker rooms were, rather. And yeah, Ronald Reagan forget about politics. Here's a guy from Hollywood. He's a celebrity. He glowed. When he walked into a room, he had this aura around him. I don't care if it was Margaret Thatcher, Gandhi, Gorbachev. It didn't matter back in those days. Prince Charles, Lady Di. He just had that presence about him, and you love the guy. And I used to put in for overtime when a state arrival would come in, depending on what country. It didn't matter. They would take care of business in the morning. And then they would have a state dinner at night. And I would purposely want to work the overtime shift at night for the dinner because he would invite everybody from Hollywood. So, as soon as the buses started unloading and the Raquel Welches and Jimmy Stewarts and Frank Sinatras of the world, walked into the into the magnetometer room, and they're in a different world. When they're at the White House, they are not, they're off their pedestal, if you will. They're in the White House. To them, they're like, no more celebrityhood. But Reagan, real quick, funny story about him. I don't want to bore you, but I remember one night there was a head of state, and I forget who it was, but Ronald Reagan wore 2 hearing aids. So when I was on the back elevator where he comes down and he walks into the state dining room and then into the state area where all his guests are, and I get over my radio, his code name was Rawhide. So Rawhide's coming down. Okay, boom. The elevator opens up. Ray Shattuck was the SAC special agent in charge. He was with President Reagan all the time. He gets off the elevator. There's the president. I say, "Good evening, sir." Ray says hello. And he takes about 3 steps. He turns and looks at Ray, and he does this. He takes his hearing aids out and he hands them to Ray Shattuck and walks into the party. He didn't want to hear nothing that night. He didn't, and I purposely watched him. He could have gave away the candy store. He was yesing, he was having a good old time.
Yeah, man. And that must have been a good time to be there. I mean, obviously, depending on who you asked, he's got a mixed legacy, but patriotism was at an all-time high, right? Gorbachev tear down that wall. I mean, I was born in the late 80s, so I didn't really experience it, but knowing about it, it must have been a good time to be there.
It was an awesome time. I was on a travel team as well. When the Pope came in, I was gone for 3 weeks. So I was on an advanced team. I would go out K9, counter snipers, whatnot. We'd set the table for the president, come in for an hour, and then he'd go home. Meanwhile, we're there a week, setting the table for his arrival. But that was interesting in itself. They kind of roll the red carpet out for you in areas that he was, he was speaking at. So, very good, interesting time. Enjoyed it. But, it wasn't my special agents with the Secret Service, credit card fraud, forgery, computer fraud. It just wasn't my deal. I enjoyed myself working protection and whatnot. But when I got the call about the U.S. Marshals, I said, this sounds like me.
So Lenny, can you tell us what is the U.S. Marshal? What is the beginnings of that? I could say program in the United States of America. When did the Marshals start, and what exactly is the job? What is the jurisdiction of the Marshals?
The U.S. Marshals, Brett, is the oldest federal law enforcement agency in this country. George Washington appointed the first 13 U.S. Marshals in 1789. So not a lot of people know that. With my Secret Service credentials, it reads a specific language, protection of the president, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Other agencies, DEA, ATF, FBI, they have specific mandates from Congress to do a job. Our credentials read to enforce all laws of the United States of America. It's unheard of. Wow. And what we do a variety of different things in law enforcement. We have the Witness Protection Program. I'm sure you're well aware of that with the Mickey Featherstone and the Sammy Gravanos of the world. We have the Asset Seizure Program. Anything that's seized by the federal government, cars, boats, houses, whatever, that is our responsibility. We transport federal prisoners to and from court. We protect the federal judiciary. Right now, they're protecting all the Supreme Court justices, the 7 that, because of the recent threats and whatnot. So there's the protection side. And then the division I worked in was the Investigative Operations Division. Those are the Manhunters of the world. Those are the men and women that, are at old dark 30 or knocking doors down, trying to find violent felony fugitives. So fast forward 9/11, the FBI focusing on domestic terrorism, and rightfully so. Congress thought it was necessary to establish permanent fugitive task forces throughout the country. So the New York, New Jersey Regional Fugitive Task Force was the flagship, or the model, if you will. That's where I was the commander there for many years until I retired. We had 350 full-time investigators from over 90 different federal, state, and local agencies. I mean, think of that. That force multiplier working together, it's unheard of. We were arresting anywhere from 100 to 110 arrests a week just in my region alone.
Wow.
And the specific language from Congress was to target the most dangerous, violent felony fugitives. And they listed it: terrorists, murderers, drug runners, gun runners, arsonists, sex offenders, the worst of the worst. Every one of them averaging 4 to 6 prior arrests. So these are pretty bad people that we're going after every single day of our lives, weekends, holidays. It's nonstop.
Yeah, Laney, we hear the word fugitive. A lot of us, we think, America's Most Wanted, fugitive. But at any given moment, how many fugitives are there in the United States? Like, let's say right now, thousands, there's got to be. Right?
Oh, right now that are active warrants from
Yeah.
a federal, state, and local perspective, there's more than thousands.
Yeah.
Let's put this into perspective. The U.S. Marshal Service averages anywhere from 70 to 90,000 arrests a year in this
90,000.
country. 90,000 fugitives. Think about that.
Wow.
Think about the jails that are bulging at the seams. The people that are on the run, and a lot of these are repeat offenders. Not a lot, but enough, especially in today's climate. It's a little tough out there.
Yeah.
The numbers are staggering. I mean, like I said, we arrested over 100 fugitives a week just in my area alone. We currently have, the U.S. Marshals currently have 8 regional fugitive task forces around the ground in several countries, vulnerable areas, Mexico City, and areas around the world. We work very well with Interpol. Mike Hughes, a former U.S. Marshal, he's the director of Interpol. They've got 186 countries under them. So, I always say you can run, but you can't hide. And when you run, Brett, you only go to jail tired.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to when you got on, you said you got on in 89. Is that correct?
I went over to the U.S. Marshals in 89. Correct.
1989. Okay. So do you remember your first big case, your first chase, maybe? Do you remember your first day where you said, wow, this is what this is going to be about? Well, I'm in.
Well, I do remember it. I don't remember the fugitive. It wasn't a big case, but it was a case. And I was up in the Bronx, and I was out with a few of my colleagues from the Brooklyn, New York office. I was in the Eastern District is where I started. And we made entry, I think about 5 o'clock in the morning. We had a pretty good idea he was in there. And a skinny kid was hiding in a closet. The brooms were bigger than him. And there was somebody that was with us. I won't mention names, but we walked past the closet because it was just a thin little skinny closet, and this person went over, opened the closet, and screamed because he was in there. He was screaming. They were going back and forth, screaming at each other. And I'm a young, I'm like, what's going? So I went over and we grabbed the guy, and that was my first arrest. And from there, you're averaging hundreds of cases per U.S. Marshal. I mean, there are so many cases that come across our desk. It's insane what we have out there. So, yeah, I've been involved in thousands of arrests, maybe more, and some pretty high profile cases, highlighted cases, if you will. Any media attention case you heard about over the past 3 decades, most likely in our area, we were involved.
And at any given moment, Lenny, you can get on a plane and be God knows where.
Sure. Yeah, no, U.S. Marshals have jurisdiction. There are no boundaries. We can cross state lines, work with our partners around the globe, which is a good thing. When state and local detectives, investigators come onto our task force, we deputize them as U.S. Marshals, pretty much giving them the same authority that I have as far as jurisdictional boundaries. So, which is a home run. I mean, I wish I had this, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, because it's, it's that force multiplier. Everybody working together at the speed of the internet is it's paramount that's how you operate in today's, especially with this digital footprint and chasing people. We're chasing ghosts most of the time. So you got to flip their worlds upside down, and we call it who's who in the zoo. We're looking at everybody once somebody goes on the run. So.
Now, is there different sectors within the Marshals? Like this guy is going to work with violent robberies. Maybe someone's going to work with maybe sex cases, stuff like that. Do you have different things like that, or are you kind of all working together?
Brett, within the division we have a sex offender branch, which is now a federal statute. John Walsh, if you remember him from America's Most Wanted, his son Adam, they actually stood up a statute. It's called the Adam Walsh Act. and they take these sex offenders very serious, and they become federal offenders, which they're getting a ton of time once they're captured and arrested and sentenced and convicted. So, the Adam Walsh Act, that's a separate unit, sex offender branch.
Okay.
We have gang units that focus on gangs and whatnot, but most of the time, U.S. Marshals work all cases. I worked every case. But we do, to answer your questions, there are some specific branches, if you will, within the division that focuses on specific cases.
Okay. Yeah, so there is a few cases I want to discuss with you, but I want to talk about, you come on in 89. I want to forward to 1992. January of 1992.
Okay.
Dapper Don, he's about to go on trial from January to April, I believe, of 1992. And this is a racketeering trial. You got him, Frank Locascio, Sammy the Bull Gravano. We know what he ends up doing. You're just a few years on the job now. You end up having something to do with this trial. Can you talk about that? 1992, John Gotti.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually in the Warren Squad at the time, but what to step back a little bit, the U.S. Marshals, they use us for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I was out for the Rodney King riots for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
President Bush sent us out there, 200 agents. When the rocket ship crashed in Texas, we were down there picking up the debris. Hurricane Katrina, I deployed for 3 weeks on a search and rescue mission. So they'll use us for everything. I got pulled off the street on the John Gotti case and Sammy and Frank to escort the three of them every day from MCC in New York, which is in downtown Manhattan, over the Brooklyn Bridge to the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse while they were on trial for 4 months, I think. So every day I would have to go to MCC. I personally would go up to the third floor. The three of them would be waiting, their orange jumpsuits. I'd cuff them, shackle them. John Gotti always had something funny to say. John was being John. Hey, Lenny, got change for 100? Come on, John. We're going down, heading over the bridge. Hey, let's stop off in Little Italy. I know some people over there. We'll get a nice breakfast. Yeah, sure, John. I'll just, make a right turn. So John was being John, but I'll tell you a funny story. As the trial went on, I show up one morning. I don't ask questions. I'm by myself. I got the cavalry downstairs with the motorcade. And I walk upstairs. John's sitting on the bench. Frank is sitting next to him. There's no Sammy. I don't say anything. John's quiet as a church mouse, which is not like John. So I get on the elevator, push going down to 1. I turn around. I look at John. I'm going to be the funny guy now. I says, hey, John. I said, where's Sammy? What is he, a rat now? Now, I had no idea that the FBI the night before brings him on board Team USA, and he's now a cooperator for the government. If looks could have killed, I'd have been dead on that elevator.
Wow.
And sure enough, the next day, front page of every newspaper, Sammy Gravano cooperates, and I got the last laugh. But anyways, fast forward, as you well know, we went to trial. He was convicted, sentenced.
The Teflon is gone. The Don is covered with Velcro, and every charge in the indictment stuck.
We had to take him up to where our Con Air, if you will, flies in. Big Boeing 747, and there's districts. They all bring their federal prisoners to this one specific area where the plane flies in. And I've got John in the back. Now, he's going to Merriam, Illinois, and then he was going to go on to Colorado, but he never made it there. So maximum security prison. He's sitting in the backseat of my car. We're driving, and he's not saying anything. So I'm thinking, well, obviously, he knows it's over. It's done. Appeals, I'm sure he'll have appeals and whatnot, but it's over for him. So we sit in the car. We pull up to the aircraft, and I tell John, sit still, let all these other districts load their prisoners. And all of a sudden, he's like this. He's shaking like you could hear his chains like the ghost of Christmas past, right? And I get out of the car by myself. I go over, I let him out. We walk up to the foot of the aircraft. He's shaking. I knew the guy on board. I says, here, Larry, here's John Gotti. Here's his medical records. What do I say to the guy? I'm with him for 4 months. I mean, hey, John, nice to meet you. Have a nice trip.
Yeah.
So I don't even remember what I said to him. I do remember he takes 3 steps up the aircraft. I turn around, walk back to my car, and I hear, hey, Lenny. I said, yeah, John, what's the matter? Everything all right? He says, yeah. He says, you think it's too late to say I'm sorry?
Oh, my God.
That's the last I heard. Wow. The last words I heard from John Gotti. However, Brett, you know why he was shaking?
Why?
Not because he was going to prison for the rest of his life. He was scared to death to get on that airplane. He never flew.
Oh, wow.
In fact, his son confirmed that for me. He never flew a day in his life. He
Wow.
was scared. He was scared to get on there. He didn't care where he was going. He just didn't want to get on that aircraft. But yeah, that John was being John.
So what does that take, Lenny? I mean, you got this guy who's the boss of the Gambino family, and you have to take him from MCC to Brooklyn every day. You know, he's a high value target to maybe somebody wants to take him out. Maybe you never know what could happen. So what does that entail? You guys have a car? You have a car behind you. You have a car on the left. What does that involve, transporting such a high profile guy like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a motorcade, kind of like, transporting the president. I had some background there. It's probably why I got chosen. I don't remember. But yeah, we were afraid of either somebody trying to break him out or somebody trying to whack him. I mean, it's plain and simple as that. And transporting the three of them, we were in a motorcade type setting. We shut the Brooklyn Bridge down every morning. We wanted to have it to be a safe environment for everybody. I remember one morning, though, he was bugging the shit. He just kept rattling on about something, and I was in a bad mood. And we ended up over the Brooklyn Bridge. We pull into the Sally Port, into the courthouse, and I get him out of the car, and he said something stupid again. And I looked at him. I says, John, I said, just remember one thing. He said, what's that? I said, my army's a lot bigger than yours. He looked at me. He looked at me like, okay, you got me there. He kept going.
Wow.
But John was, hey, he was the Dapper Don. He got in a fight in MCC one day, and they put him in 9 South in solitary confinement. And I had to go pick him up because the judge wanted to see him. They was trying to get out of, solitary confinement and go back into general population. So I get him in the car, and he says, hey, what do you think? The judge going to let me out? Is he in a good mood today? But I said, yeah, John, you're good. Nah, he's not letting me out. He's a this, that, blah, blah, blah. I says, all right. I says, I'll bet you your tie. He used to wear like $1 million ties, this guy. I mean, his suits were God knows how much. I said, I'll bet you that tie he lets you out. He goes, all right, you're on. We go in, goes before the judge, blah, blah, blah. He lets him out of 9 South, and we get back in the car. I don't even mention anything to him, but we get back to the car, driving back to MCC. I go around the side. I open the door. What do you think is sitting on the back seat of my car?
The tie. Wow.
It's his tie. I mean, I took and stuffed it back in his pocket. But,
I thought you kept it.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I think I did. Anyways, he was true to his word. Let's put it that way. Let's put it that way. But Sammy, Sammy Gravano was, he cooperated. Did his thing. He was actually in the witness protection program for a while until he got thrown out of there, and ended up where he ended up. So
I got a couple. I mean, a lot of people come to my channel. They like this mob stuff, so forgive me. I have one more question about Gotti, and I want to ask you about a couple other guys.
Yeah.
When Sammy ends up going to Team USA, as you put it, do you think John's demeanor changed every day when you were picking up, or when you were picking him up, or was he still kind of laughing and messing around, or did you see a different person?
A little bit, and only because I was with him all the time. When he was in the public eye, he was John. I mean, he was the Dapper Don. He, strutted his stuff. He never put his head down. Even when Sammy took the stand, I mean, he just stared at him. I remember, because I was sitting on trial with him every day. I noticed it personally because I was there. He was thinking. You could smell the smoke. He knew he was in trouble. At that point. Even what was his attorney? Oh my God,
Cutler.
Yeah, Cutler. Bruce Cutler. Bruce was even. They were talking a lot more in each other's ears after that. That's for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I think he was. He kind of figured that. Wasn't sure if he was going to get out of this one.
Yeah. Well,
and obviously, he did. Sammy. You know what it is, though, these cooperators. I mean, we had the Windows trial in the early 90s, yep. Peter Gotti, that crew, Benny Eggs, that whole, and I think it was a Philly and Eddie out of Philadelphia ended up cooperating. And, it's always somebody, was it White Heat? The funny thing about those canaries, they can sing, but they sure can't fly. Get me? So, it's become a world of cooperators anymore, especially with the Italian mafia.
Yeah. You almost wonder why any of these guys are still messing around in that but I guess you can't change.
You know what? The Omerta or whatever they call
Yeah.
it, and the Sicilians, they swear and prick their fingers and rub their blood.
Yeah.
I guess that's yesterday's news, Brad. I don't know.
Yeah.
Water under the bridge.
Right. So I want to talk to you about another guy.
Yeah.
On June 3rd, 1990, Tommy Karate Patera,
Oh yeah.
brutal Bonanno family mobster. I think when they arrested him, of course, he was running this massive drug trafficking thing. He had about, I think, over 20-something people, which they dubbed the Patera crew. Obviously, he's operating under the Bonanno crime family. I think originally they had him on about 8 or 9 murders. He goes down for 6, and it's actually a death penalty trial. Tell me about June 3rd, 1990. What happens? Because you were one of the guys on that team that arrested Tommy.
Correct. I was there. It was a joint task force. I remember DEA. It was a drug warrant. We work, just so you know, the U.S. Marshals have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the DEA. We work all of their cases, fugitive cases. So if an indictment comes down like Patera or whatnot, we'll work with the agents sometimes, but most of the time we go out on our own, make the arrest, and then turn the body over to them, and they go to trial or cop a plea or whatever these people do. That morning, Tommy, I didn't even know who he was. Again, when I come to work, you get a warrant. Yes, you're briefed on it. You do your homework and whatnot. And as the case goes on, the fugitive investigation, you got to remember there's usually an intense manhunt happening, but there's also a fugitive investigation going on behind the scenes. That was a brand new warrant. I mean, they were looking at him for a long time. I'm sure they were up on wires, whatever the DEA does best. But I was there for the arrest on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. He thought he was being hit. I mean, he fought like he could fight. I mean, they called him Tommy Karate for a reason. Yeah. He lost, and he ended up in our custody. Brought him back to the Eastern District, was processing him and whatnot. I would see him a lot in the cell block while he was in trial or pre-trial stuff. And I remember one time I walked in, and he remembered me because not only I was there, he would see me all the time in the Brooklyn courthouse when he would come into court. And he was a vicious animal. I mean, he was cutting bodies up in his bathtub in his apartment. Him and his girlfriend were having fun in the bathtub after this craziness would go on. Blood, and you can only imagine this sick, the sickness that this guy is all about. But I remember walking in one day. He was in the cell block. He was in a cell, and I walked by, and he says, "Lenny," I says, "Yeah, Tommy, what's the matter?" He says, "I miss my bathtub." And his eyes were like wide open like this. Wow. And I said, I go, "You're a sick," and kept walking. But this is what this kind of guy you're dealing with. I think he went down, 6 murders. God knows how many more. The Staten Island, the mob burial grounds, if you will. He was cutting bodies up and burying them over there. And I think there was a dog that got onto that, right? I believe over there that a dog.
They started digging. It was I'm sorry, hold on one second. You know what happened was they had the guy Frank Ganji who was cooperating against him. And,
right. What's his name? Son. Yeah.
It was so dark that he didn't really remember where they put the body. So they had everyone there with these what do you call them? The probes in the ground.
Yeah,
they stayed there for days probing this whole area in Staten Island. And I'm sure they did have dogs, but eventually they did hit on something. Connected to that, actually, Lenny, there's a guy, Vincent Kojak Giattino, who was in Tommy Patera's crew, who was a fugitive who actually ended up on America's Most Wanted. Do you know anything about that? Do you remember that?
I remember him. I remember the case. I was not working that case.
You weren't working okay.
No, I was not involved with that case. I mean, obviously, those highlighted cases, especially back in those days. I mean, the mob was running rampant in New York City. The 5 families. It was so we would get involved, and then you always had your parole violators, the Vincent the Chin Gigante and that crew, and then Sonny Francesi. I mean, I arrested him probably 6 times. I mean, he always violated his federal parole. Wow. Who was the other guy in Queens? I mean, there's been so many. Benny Alloy. So there's a laundry list of them. But you want to know something though? Most of them, I'm going to say 90% they throw their hands up, and there's a mutual respect there with those guys. There always was. You got your select few, especially the young wise guys, think who they are or whatever. But I never had problems with that I can recall with any of them. They played fugitive. I call it adult hide and seek. They give it a shot, and then when the news starts tightening and we set that perimeter up, and here we come, they just like, okay, guys, you got me. We're not another 3-letter agency that likes to put on a show. We don't do that. We make the arrest. We go home. There's other agencies that haven't found a microphone they haven't liked yet. And I know who I'm talking about.
So, yeah.
They love to announce the arrest of, well, God bless you. I got 7,000 more cases.
You got other things to do, right?
Yeah. But the mob, those cases, oh God, I can't remember, I don't know how many, especially the Italian mafia. And then there's others, obviously in Brooklyn, there's certainly, even the Asian gangs were tough. The Born to Kill, BTK.
BTK. Yeah.
You remember those guys?
David Ty.
Yep. And you had, who was the prosecutor? They mailed her. It was a briefcase she was getting ready to open. It was wired. Kathy, they used to call her the Dragon Lady. She was the U.S. attorney that prosecuted all these cases.
Was it Giacalone?
No. Kathy's Irish. Oh God. Anyways, they dubbed her. She was nicknamed the Dragon Queen or something like that. But she would always send us to Hong Kong areas. We'd extradite because U.S. Marshals are responsible for all extraditions around the world. So we were constantly in Asia, Hong Kong. Just extraditing all these. Kathy Palmer. Was her name. Yep.
Wow. Oh, so you would go over to China to get these guys?
Oh, Hong Kong. I can't tell you how many trips. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, she would bring them in by the busloads.
And you had the other guy there at that time, Machine Gun Johnny Yang. That was another. They called him Onion Head, I believe they called him.
Yeah. Well, you had Born to Kill, BTK. There was some other.
Yeah,
was that the Vietnamese? Was that what is it?
I think they had the Ghost Shadows, Flying Dragons.
Was it Vietnamese gang? I think I don't know.
The Vietnamese was the BTK actually.
Oh, so that was BTK. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
That was David Ty. And those.
See, you're doing your homework. You know better, and I was there, and you know better.
Yeah.
Than me.
Yeah, I always found an interesting dichotomy. You had these crazy Chinese guys over here, Vietnamese. A few blocks away, you had these crazy Italians. It's just, and then right in the middle, you got Canal Street. I always found that to be pretty.
They knew that boundary though, because they usually didn't cross over, at least back in those days.
Yeah.
Because you had with Gigante in downtown Manhattan. I was on him when he was in the hospital, and I was working his details. I was actually in his room when his brother was a priest. I don't know if you remember the Gigante.
Louis Gigante.
Yeah, the chin. His mom would come in. She had a box of cannolis one Saturday morning. Can I? I said, yeah, go ahead. As long as I can have one. So but he would sit there and he'd love to talk. He'd love to talk about fighting and boxing. And then somebody would walk in and he would go back into his stupor, crazy key. He was, with his umbrella and his bathrobe. And but he was about as dumb as a fox, that guy.
So I want to talk to you about another case that you had mentioned to me. These group of guys in the early 90s I believe out of Brooklyn. They called themselves, I don't know if they called themselves this or they got dubbed this, the 40 Thieves Gang.
Oh, yeah.
There was a 40 Thieves Gang way back in the early beginnings of Manhattan, an old Irish gang, which they consider one of the first gangs in New York City. But then you had these guys in the 90s. Marcus Dwayne Robertson, who actually served as a bodyguard for the Blind Sheikh out of there over in the Al Farouk Mosque over there.
Correct.
Serious guys. What were these guys into, Lenny? When did you get involved in that case?
Well, they were named the 40 Thieves. They named themselves. And I got involved because one of the enforcers or the enforcer of the group, his name was Roland Campbell. He was the only fugitive. Once they swept him, they arrested Robinson and that whole crew. Roland Campbell was their enforcer. He would train these guys in the woods on how to survive. Paramilitary kind of guy, vicious animal. He was on the run. And so we got involved. The postal inspectors had the case because this gang was doing mostly post offices, banks, a lot of robberies, murders, and whatnot. And this guy, Marcus Robinson, you mentioned, he was he ended up, getting involved with some terrorist groups and whatnot too, and in our country with camps and whatnot. That's a whole other story. But as far as the 40 Thieves, Roland Campbell, it was a pretty intense investigation. I remember I had the case with a guy out of Baltimore, and we ended up, long story short, we had a pretty good idea he was in Costa Rica, and so we decided to head down there. We had some friendlies on the ground we were back and forth with, and had a beat on the guy. It was myself and 3 other investigators. We jump on a plane. We did get country clearance going into Costa Rica, which was good. So we were armed. We get in. Our plane got messed up in Miami. It was a nightmare. We were up all night. Thank God, because they ended up going out where they thought he was, and he's got an AK-47. He ends up shooting a cop. It was a nightmare of an evening. But they got him into custody. We fly in. He was in their little jail, if that's what you want to call it. We go to the airport, and I walked into the room where he was sitting, and it was packed. I mean, there was a lot of people in there, which I thought was a little bizarre. Now, mind you, we're in a foreign country. I mean, we got an aircraft on the runway. It was a commercial airlines, getting ready to take off, and I said, we got to get out of here. So Campbell's sitting there, and he goes into a asthma attack, or at least that's what he, portrayed himself as going into. He had 2 sets of clothes on him. When I remember searching him, he had a pair of sweatpants, and under sweatpants he had a pair of jeans. Little odd. He had denominations. He had U.S. currency. He had their money. So it was a little bizarre with him sitting there. And I looked up, and there was a woman there with a red dress on, attractive woman. And I turned to the embassy attaché, and I asked her, I said, who's that? And she said, that's the judge on his case. I said, what is she doing here? Oh, well, and then she's now talking in Spanish, and she's telling the locals, you got to take him to the hospital. He's having an asthma attack. So, you don't have to hit me with a ton of bricks. I mean, you talk about corruption at its finest. Long story short, I said, we're getting this. We put him in a wheelchair. We'll wheel him out on the tarmac. He didn't want to get up. We actually picked him up, and I have video of it. Picked him up upside down, and we went up the back of the aircraft, and his head was hitting each step as we were going onto the aircraft, and they videotaped the whole thing. Well, when I got back to this country, the embassy had sent me a videotape of what was going on. They had people up on the roof videotaping everything. If we would have taken him to the hospital, they had the route to the hospital lined with all of his cronies. They were going to ambush us. I probably wouldn't have made it home alive. So we kind of got lucky, that we zigged when we zagged, or should have zagged and got out of there. But you talk about, a nail biting kind of a trip. You sit back when you get home, you think about it like, so our radio in, we flew into Houston. We got country clearance coming in, and into New York. I said, listen, here's what happened. So there was a cavalry waiting for us in New York when we got, actually we landed in Newark, New Jersey. But anyways, so he goes to trial, and funny story, he asked for a patois interpreter. Yeah. Because his defense was he was never in this country and whatnot. So apparently he lived with his grandmother somewhere in New Hampshire. So I remember one of the case agents came down at lunch and says, hey, you got to come up to the trial. I said, why? He says, oh, it's the funniest thing with this interpreter. And I didn't even know what a patois interpreter was back in those days. So anyways, I go up, I sit in the back of the courtroom, and the U.S. attorney was cross-examining, and the question to him on the stand, and the patois interpreter standing next to him was, it's true, is it not, that you lived with your grandmother in wherever in New Hampshire? And the patois interpreter turns to him and says, you stayed with your mama up in New Hampshire. It's like, what did he just say? I had to walk out. I was laughing. Anyways, long story short, he ended up, I'm sure he's still in prison.
I mean, just for further context, about this guy, Marcus Dwayne Robertson.
He was an animal, that guy.
Ultimately, he gets back into the news in the 2010s. He's now going by the name Abu Tabao. He's down in Florida. He's outed as some guy that's been an FBI informant for over a decade or so. And he's running this program out of Florida where he's sending all these radical Muslims to Africa, and they're training and all this. And one of his, I don't know, acolytes, I don't know how often this guy would go to his mosque, was Omar Mateen, the guy who did the Pulse nightclub shooting, who attacked the gay nightclub in Florida.
Yep.
So, and then he ends up getting arrested. And to be honest with you, Lenny, I'm not too sure he's in prison right now.
Well, he cooperated. I'll tell you. I mean, he ended up, as you said a little while ago, coming on board
Yeah.
the USA as well. Cooperated as, and again, I'm not involved with, we chase people for a living. I don't get involved with trials or following up, but I was pretty close with the case agent that had the Roland Campbell case and the 40 Thieves case. Great guy. And he would fill me in on a lot of things, and his relationship actually with Marcus, and he would tell me some pretty bizarre stories that I would like to share, but I still can't. But anyways, he ended up helping out, I guess, cooperating, did his thing. And again, I didn't follow, where he ended up or what he did, but I knew he was involved with some pretty heavy stuff.
So speaking, I touched a little bit just there on the, Muslim extremism and stuff like that. So being a marshal in New York City on 9/11, 9/11 happens, the towers fall. Being in your position, after that happens, where does that take you in life? Where do you end up? Are you traveling the world? Are you going to the Middle East? What do they do with a guy like you?
Well, I'll tell you the story. 9/11 showed up. My daughter was born on September 7th, 4 days before 9/11. So I was actually home. She was just out of the hospital. I'll never forget. It was Tim. Tim was here. I mean, we were watching. I was watching the Giants game. The Giants were playing the Denver Broncos Monday Night Football. So I had baby duty. My wife was tired. She went to bed. I watched the Broncos beat my Giants here in New York. And I went to sleep late. My daughter was, up, I'm sure late. I don't remember, but I'm in bed, I'm sleeping. And all of a sudden I get woken up. My wife's crying and she's shaking me. And I jumped up because I thought something happened with the baby. And she says, a plane just ran into the World Trade Center. I said, what the hell are you waking me up for? I mean, I'm tired. I went, She turns on, we had a little TV in the bedroom. As she turns it on, here comes the second plane. With that, my house phone's ringing. My beeper is going off. I think I might have had a BlackBerry. The point is, they were, I got dressed. I went downstairs. I kissed my daughter on her forehead. I apologized for bringing her into this crazy world, and I was gone. I mean, I pulled out of here. I had my lights and sirens going because we take our cars. I had a SUV at the time. I pull in, I didn't have gas. I pull into the gas station. I'll never forget it. I'm gassing up and people were clapping and cheering. I'm looking around. I go, what are they? I left my lights on, but they knew where I was going and they were yelling out all kinds of crazy, go get those. I had no idea who it was. I knew it was somebody obviously that hit us. But so anyways, long story short, I was down in New York for maybe a week or so. And then that we got mandated to take over all level 4 airports. So I was the supervisor at JFK Airport for about 3 weeks, maybe a month. And we talk about a crazy, chaotic nightmare that place was. It was just, I don't want to bore you to death, but it was just out of control what was going on there. I got a call one morning from my bosses in Washington, and they said, you need to come down to D.C. And I said, well, I'm a little busy. What's going on? They said, you got to come down. Okay. So I tell my wife, I got to go. I get down to Washington. I got swept off into the bowels of the Department of Justice, and I was read on to a military intelligence team, if you will. They were now in the manhunting business. So the Department of Justice says we need somebody that knows how to hunt people. So they picked on me. I was the only one. I'm not complaining about it, but at the time, I'm now dealing with our intel communities, more CIA, DIA, NSA, all the intel. And these you talk about men and women that are brainiacs. And here I am, the village idiot. I walk into what's called a SCIF, a secured compartmental facility where you can't have your cell phones. You're tucked into this vault, and you're discussing high value targets and whatnot. So we were. Military was in the manhunting business. I would bring common sense to the table. I would stand up in our briefings and depending on our targets. And, they all had the answers in that room, but they weren't talking to each other. And it happened a lot back in the, pre 9/11 day. But what had happened to me at that point was I deployed. I was in Afghanistan for a while, working with, and again, I can't get into too much detail, but I was with folks that was in Fallujah before the war started, if you know what I'm saying. So, it was a very interesting few years. I'm still very good friends with who's now a 4-star general who sits atop of SOCOM, Special Operations Command in Tampa. Him and I are still very good friends. He was the commander of the group back in the day. But you talk about a whole different experience and same stuff, different theater as far as manhunting goes, but wow. I mean, you're talking about people that are trained to search and destroy. I'm in law enforcement. We step back, we look for concealment, contain, cover or whatever. Not these people, and they look like the average, John Q. citizen walking down the street with a beard and long hair, but they'd kill you in a second. But it was an interesting. I did a lot of training with these guys. I had fun for several years. Sad part about it is I didn't see my daughter grow up, and Timmy and those guys that were in, still living here in my house. It was just I don't know where the years went, but yeah, we did God's work and made some pretty good arrest, and I'll have to leave it at that, unfortunately.
No, I completely understand. I mean, I can't even imagine. They call you. We need someone who knows how to hunt humans. I mean, that's got to be a hell of a thing to hear. It's
Brett. I don't beat my own chest. I mean, we're good at what we do. I mean, it's not. Yeah. I couldn't work a drug case or a bank robbery case, FBI. But when it comes to hunting human beings, when you do it 7 days a week, holidays, weekend, you become pretty good at it. And we're the best in the business. The U.S. Marshals, they're the premier agency in this country in finding people that are on the run. And you gotta check those boxes, put that puzzle together, connect the dots, and especially now with technology and digital footprints and all this, throwaway phones or burners, whatever, there is so much that goes on. But we have talent in our electronic surveillance units, our technical operations group, our financial surveillance unit. Those people are the best in the business. And like I said earlier, if you're running, good luck. It's tough.
All right. Yeah. So Lenny, I know you only got about 15 more minutes or so. So I want to, into the 2000s, you've already had this amazing career. You got a lot going on, but that wasn't enough because they said Lenny DePaul needs to be on television. So,
oh my God,
A&E comes calling, and I got to be honest with you. I swear, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. It was one of my favorite shows at the time, A&E Manhunters.
There you go.
And I think it's one of the best reality.
That's the poster. I think
there you go. It's one of the best, maybe top 2 or 3 law enforcement reality shows that I think was ever on TV. I mean, you got First 48, I think is great, stuff like that. And one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it looking back, I was thinking about it, Lenny, you got a show like Cops, right? You watch Cops and it's like you got some homeless guy, some drug addict. Half the time you end up feeling bad for this. Like, what the hell? Hopefully this fucking guy gets his shit together, But with that show, I mean, there was really it was obvious who the bad guys were, Lenny. And you guys were, like you've been saying, doing God's work. You were really going after some of the worst people on the streets. And I think that came across really well, the camaraderie with your fellow marshals. Of course, you were the commander. So can you talk to me about that show and what was it like being on TV?
I'll definitely tell you about it. And I only got about maybe 10 minutes. I do apologize. I got to run, but
I completely understand.
I get a call from our, the person that worked in the front office. She says, there's a couple of producers, TV producers that keep calling you. And I said, yeah, don't, so I put him off for a while. Finally, this guy gets through to me. I talk to him and he says, yeah, we like to do this, that, and blah, blah. So I steer him toward our public affairs office in Washington. I got no time for this. We're a brand new federally funded task force. I wasn't sleeping. I mean, we're working around the clock. So I get a call from our headquarters, Don Hines, chief of public affairs. He says, listen, this was a great idea. We're a congressionally funded task force. What an absolutely wonderful way of showing the American taxpayers on how some of their money's being spent. I said, Don, I'm a little busy and no, thank you. He says, no, you got to take a meeting. I said, are you serious? Long story short, I lost. Two producers come into my office. They sit down, and they were older gentlemen. I love them both. I'm still in touch with them today. But he says to me, he looks around, he goes, well, he says, this is a parole office, right? I said, well, parole's here, but so is 90 other agencies. And they looked at each other and said, I think we hit the mother load. So I discussed some things with them, told them that I have no time for this. What's your vision? Fast forward, they brought a production company in, A&E. Laura Fleury was our producer over there. She was great. She came in, they sold it. We got picked up, I think, for actually the first season. If you remember Dog the Bounty Hunter, he ended up getting arrested. He had messed up in Mexico. He arrested some kid for rape out of California, and which he can't do. And they ended up letting the kid go and locking him up at the airport. He never went back. And so guess who got his arrest warrant to go arrest Dog the Bounty Hunter? We did. Now you got to think about this. We're getting ready to film with A&E. That's their biggest show on television, First 48, Dog the Bounty Hunter. And now we got to go arrest him. So I called Laura. I said, Laura, you're not going to believe this. She said, oh my God. I said, look, this is going to look a little weird that we're coming on our first season. We got to go arrest this guy. But long story short, he gets locked up. His wife wasn't too kind, but he was nice to the guys that arrested him. And we ended up getting picked up for 20 episodes the first season because of his show went off the air because of that. So it was a great show. I mean, if you think about it, we were always batting 1,000. We arrested somebody every episode. We shot, I think, 64 episodes. And it ended up, it featured, I think, maybe 4 or 5, 6 regular investigators. I was on every episode, and our recruiting lines were ringing off the hook. People kind of figured out, wow, that's a U.S. Marshal. I thought they, put boots on cars or threw people out of apartments for a living. No, we're the U.S. Marshals, not the city marshal. So it was good. It was positive press for us. I have to say, it was a lot of work. I never went home. I mean, I ran running the largest task force of its kind in the world and filming a television show. I never slept. I mean, it was insane for 3 seasons, which was about 4 years of filming. I think we ended up in 2011 or 12. The show's still in reruns. I think it's in 12 countries. I get a call or social media stuff fires up because I'll say, oh, it must be running somewheres again. But it was good. I mean, we went after some pretty bad people. We don't target, turnstile jumpers and deadbeat dads, if you will, which are bad people. Don't get me wrong. But we go after the worst of the worst.
Yeah. So when you arrested the dog, did you offer him a cigarette and have a prayer circle? Or
mad. I wish I could find it. He wrote a letter to the Marshal Service and thanked us for being so kind. The only thing that upset him, funny you should say that, they didn't allow him to smoke a cigarette in the car.
Okay, because that's his gimmick.
And that was the only thing he was upset about was
that's funny,
that. Man. Now his wife, God rest her soul, I know she passed away. She wasn't too happy with the guys knocking on her door.
Yeah. So Lenny, when do you retire from the Marshals?
I retired now 8 years ago.
8 years ago?
And it has flown by. It seems like yesterday, only because I still keep my finger on the pulse. We're trying to do another television show similar to what we just talked about. I'm currently filming a show they're not sure if Netflix or Amazon is going to pick it up. It's a cold case series that I actually have the lead in that. So I'm back and forth to California. It hasn't been released, so they don't want me to talk about it. And then I have a clothing line. My wife is in the fashion business, which I think you know. So during COVID, she said, hey, why don't we stand up a tactical clothing line? And I said, honey, I'm retired. I lost that argument, and here we are 2 years later. So ODark30, the letter O, DARK 30.com. Anybody listening? That's our
link
website.
in the description.
Yeah, odark30.com is our website. And so that's keeping me busy with this tactical clothing line as well. So I'm staying busy, doing a couple TV shows, and that's it.
And you did Hunting Hitler. You went chasing those blonde people over in Argentina, right?
I'll tell you, that was a great series. That was another 3 seasons. I'll tell you what, when I got that call, and as everyone else says, I thought he was dead. Yeah, well, he is, but we wanted to figure out, did he get out of that Fuhrer bunker, in April 1945 or not? So 45, and I think he escaped, Brad. I think he got out. I think we had enough evidence. I'm a show me kind of guy. The interviews that were being done and the way we put that puzzle together. I was pretty convinced that he only lived maybe, I think they said 6 or 7 years after that. He was pretty sick. I believe Eva Braun lived to 2000, his wife. And yeah, I don't have enough time to explain.
Lived up to the year 2000, you think?
Yeah, that's what Gerard Williams, who sadly just passed away from cancer. He was my partner in Hunting Hitler. We went to Berlin together. We were all over Norway, South America, obviously Chile. But he was the investigative fellow that was with me as far as most of the series. He wrote the book Gray Wolf. I don't know if you ever read that. In fact, the series was based on his book. Okay. So he hit the nail right on the head. But yeah, he had said that he believed she lived to around 2000. So, wow. But again, I wish I had time to even talk about.
No, I understand. Yeah. And for anyone that doesn't know, there's this whole group of German-speaking people in Argentina. Where did they come from? It's just...
Well, the Nazis were. Oh my God! I mean, if you're bored, grab that series from the History Channel called Hunting Hitler. It was a good 3 seasons, and we uncovered a lot of stuff, a lot of intel. Tim Kennedy, I don't know if you know Tim. Tim's a former, he's a belt holder with the MME guys and Green Beret Army. Great guy to work with, and so it was some good teams. Bob Baer, former CIA operative, was in our command post, and others. So yeah, it was interesting. It was really interesting, and we were working off of 700 pages of recently released FBI documents that they had released. So yeah, it was a lot of good intel, and we certainly dug up a lot of good stuff.
Wow. Well, Lenny, listen, I really appreciate you.
I hate to go, Brett.
No, I understand. We'll close it out now. I appreciate you coming on. Lenny DePaul, once again, Navy veteran, former Secret Service during the Reagan administration. He is also a retired U.S. Marshal, where he was the chief inspector and the commander of the New Jersey Regional Task Force. And is that the largest one in the world, Lenny?
Largest fugitive task force of its kind still to this day in the world. Wow. That's correct.
So, yeah, Lenny, as they say, is kind of a big deal, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said, if there's a big case going on in this country and they're looking for somebody, there's a big homicide, someone's on the run, there's a good chance you're going to see Lenny on TV, on Fox, News Nation, one of these channels. Before we go, Lenny, you have any last words?
No, just thank you for having me on. I enjoyed talking about this. It was a good career. The government owned me for 35 years. And I would recommend, if anybody wanted to chase people for a living, U.S. Marshals is the place to be. So sign that contract and do your thing.
And before we go, what are the requirements? What are they looking for?
You do need a 4-year degree as a prerequisite. They like military backgrounds, but you know something? I sat on the interview panel for 7 years in New York. And it's all won or lost in the interview room. I don't care what your background is. When you get into the hypothetical questions and whatnot, make sure you do your homework. Don't come in like Rambo and want to kill everybody, or use your head. But it's a great job. And like as George Orwell once said, people sleep peaceably in their people sleep peaceably in their beds at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. These are the men and women that do this type of work, and I salute them every day, Brett.
There you go. And that's a great way to end it. Listen, Lenny, thank you so much. I hope maybe one day we can do this again.
Yep.
And I wish you nothing but the best of luck in your future endeavors, and good luck with whatever television programs are coming up. I'll surely be watching them.
Thank you. I'll keep you up to speed, and you stay well and be safe.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Take care.